Mr. Secretary, sometimes here on this committee we have a sense of frustration. The news reports all day are about a U.S. destroyer, naming the destroyer, going inside the 12-mile zone around these islands. Why would you not confirm or deny that that happened, since all the details and the action happened? This is what frustrates members of this committee when it's out there in the media, throughout, saturating the media, and you won't even tell us. Is it what? Maybe you understand our frustration here, Mr. Secretary.
I do understand your frustration, and I just match it with my own frustration, which is that these are operations that we should be conducting normally.
But the American people should know about it, and we're their representatives. And you refuse to even confirm or deny something that is all over the media and confirmed by everyone, and you come before this committee and say you won't comment on it? Why?
Well, I'm going to not be coy with you. I don't like, in general, the idea of talking about our military operations. But what you read in the newspaper is accurate. But I don't want to say more than that, and I don't want to say when, whether, and how we operate anywhere in the world. One of the things
I don't think that the senator asked you to tell why, when, and how. He just asked you whether you could confirm it or not.
I can.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly, Senator Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to get back to Syria and to some of the questions the Chairman was asking about safe zones. We seem lost. We seem lost and at confusion about what to do next, unable to put any real marker down or have any plan for success. The people are voting, and they're voting with their feet. They're leaving. There's refugees all over the world now. And we have the opportunity to set up safe zones. And what I hear is we're worried about the Russians, we're worried about the Syrians, we're worried about all of these things. I mean, at what point do we put a plan together, execute the plan, tell them what we're going to do, and say, stay out of the way?
With respect to a safe, I distinguish a safe zone from a no-fly zone. A safe zone is a zone on the ground. We have analyzed them and discussed them with partners in the region. They are principally not in regions where we would expect them to be contested so much by Assad as by ISIL and al-Nusra. And therefore, they have to be defended against that threat, and that's a military undertaking.
Then are we unwilling
people in the region who we have not made that recommendation.
At what point, how many people have to leave before we make that decision?
Senator, let me go back. It's going to if you create a zone like that, then you do have to ask who is going to come into the zone. Are there people who have left Syria who are going to return to Syria from Turkey or Europe to occupy a zone from which they didn't come? Are there people elsewhere in Syria who are going to come to that zone? So you do have to ask yourself, for whom would it be attractive to be in such a zone? And then secondly, who is going to
probably some of the folks in Germany and in other countries who would rather have stayed in their own country.
If they wish to return to the part of the country for which the zone in which the zone is created. But again, it would depend on where it was, and it would be contested.
Well, let me ask you, in barrel bombs, we've talked about this time after time here. Why are we unwilling to send a message to Assad that if he continues with barrel bombing, we will stop him and crater his runways?
We have not undertaken to engage as the U.S. military, the Syrian military. We have not taken that step.
So how do you ever stop the barrel bombing?
The way that the civil war in Syria will end, just to get back to what we've been saying repeatedly, is for Assad to depart and for there to be a political
Why would he depart at this point?
Because the opposition to him is intense and strengthening.
Well, as far as I can see, he's had 3 or 4 additional allies come on board. If anything, the calculation for him is his cards are getting better.
No, again, our priority has been to combat ISIL. We are not, as the U.S. military, undertaking to combat Syria.
Well, let me just ask you this. In the process of combating ISIL, does the United States stand by as another nation barrel bombs the people we're trying to protect?
We have sought now for some time and continue to do a political transition in Syria that would end the Syrian civil war. We have not pursued a military solution to that.
I would just say from my...
Senator McCaskill.
Yes. Senator Reid, thank you all for being here. And by the way, let me just at the beginning of my questions give a mention to Master Sergeant Joshua Wheeler. He is, there probably is no better example of someone who has run to danger for this country over and over and over again. I believe this was his 14th deployment. So I wanted to mention his name in the hearing today. We all mourn his loss and the loss of his family, and we support them as they move through this trying time. Senator Reid asked you about the new Syrian forces in northern Syria. Have we provided resupply to those forces?
We have, Senator.
Okay. And have they successfully called in airstrikes?
They have, Senator.
Okay. And can you tell us, for the record, how many?
I cannot, Senator. I can get that information for you. I don't know the number.
That would be terrific. On Iraq, train and equip, as you all know, I have a tendency to read those IG reports. The one that came out September 30th raised several concerns that I'm worried about. One is asking us to refurbish the conditions under which these Iraqis are training. The DIG recommends that the coalition work with the Iraqi Minister of Defense to devise and implement a plan that clarifies the contributions of Iraq and the United States to improve their living conditions. Evidently, the IG is saying that we're having desertions because they're living in such squalor in terms of the conditions under which they're training. I just think of the billions and billions on infrastructure we spend in Iraq, and I'm trying to get my arms around, are we going to go in and fix up something that's going to rot when we leave? Or is Iraq going to step up and do what's necessary to make these conditions palatable for the recruits?
Senator, what I would tell you, and this is my perspective, and I think this is where we're at right now, is that our relationship with Iraq has to be transactional, and there has to be certain conditions that they would meet before we would provide support. And that absolutely is the framework within which I'll provide recommendations for any support to the Iraqi forces, would be that it would be based on their behavior and their willingness to be true partners and meet certain conditions that would indicate they'd be headed in the direction that you described.
Capital expenditures, just really great, I think, on many of us who have watched the amount of money that we wasted on capital expenditures in Iraq. And on that same line of questioning, the MRAPs that are coming from Afghanistan, the same IG report points out that many of them are missing parts, and there's a real question whether they have the capability of maintaining these MRAPs going forward. Once again, are there discussions about who is going to bear the costs of making these MRAPs that we're giving them actually operational?
Senator, you're talking about the MRAPs we gave to the Afghan security forces?
I'm talking about the ones, the excess ones that we're moving over. U.S. is providing 250 MRAPs to the Iraqi Army. They're excess defense items and being shipped to Iraq from Afghanistan. Those are the MRAPs I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can't comment on what the arrangements are, but I'll get that information for you, Senator, in terms of what arrangements were made as we've given them. Typically, when we provide that equipment, it's in as-is condition when we provide it to another country, and I assume that's the rule.
I just want to make sure we're not going to the expense of sending them something that isn't operational, that we don't want to have to spend a lot of money to fix up, and secondly, that they don't have the capability of maintaining. Sustainability, I mean, Secretary Carter knows this has been a refrain from the very beginning. It does us no good to give them things if they cannot sustain it, and of course that's one of the reasons that we're having the problems in Iraq we have right now, is they were politically incapable of sustainability. Briefly, on a separate subject, I just want to bring this up, and I won't go into the details here, but I am desperately trying to get at helping the veterans that were subjected to mustard gas experiments. And I'm having a really difficult time with your folks about this. They're saying that even if I have the name of the veteran and the privacy waiver, they will not give me information out of your mustard gas database without a letter from the chairman. I don't understand why this is so hard. Why is everyone not opening up these records and doing everything we can to get the word to these people? There are a lot of folks out there that were subjected to mustard gas experiments, and the VA wants to point at you, and I'm hitting a wall at DOD on this. And I really need a commitment from you all today that you will get me the information as to why this is, why me trying to help veterans who maybe have been exposed to mustard gas, why this should be so hard. Would you all be willing to make that commitment that you will work with my office instead of keep throwing up roadblocks? I've been at this for months.
I'm not familiar with this issue, but as always, we'll make sure that we support your request. I'll look into it and with the chairman, and we'll get back to you as appropriate.
And I've been waiting since July for evidence to back up your claim that there was justification for the $36 million, 664,000 square foot building in Afghanistan. There was a call for discipline for the people who had okayed that building. It's sitting empty, and I've been asking since July as to, you said that you didn't think, Secretary Carter, you contested the findings and said that you didn't think disciplinary action was appropriate. I've asked what the evidence is that would indicate disciplinary action is not appropriate, and I've been waiting since July. So if you could get that on your to-do list, too, I would really appreciate it.
I believe the Defense Department may underestimate the critical nature of the refugee crisis. This is not like Iran-Iraq war that went on for many, many years. This is impacting Europe right now. It is a humanitarian crisis. It's being exploited by everyone else in the Middle East that would like to come to Europe. Europe is facing what one top diplomat told me was the greatest crisis since the World War II. And I think we've got to think about this safe haven, these safe zones, and get busy on it. And if we General Petraeus said it might have to have some of our people at risk defensively to try to protect those areas, but we wouldn't take a lot. You and I talked, Secretary Carter, about it. Can't we get moving on this? How many more millions are going to have to flee and being lined up in areas that we don't, before we act? Just morally, my judgment is that Europe needs to know there is a place for these refugees to go other than to flee the entire region. That will strengthen them. Can we not do that? Quickly.
Well, insofar as the refugees are coming from Syria, they're actually coming to Europe from several places.
All over.
But to the extent they're coming from Syria, this is why it is so important that the Syrian civil war be put to an end. And our approach to that is political. It's not military, and that's been a persistent subject of discussion here. We have not undertaken to achieve that goal militarily. Our approach to that is political. We hope that that transition occurs and that the civil war in Syria ends, and that is something that...
Or if it takes 3 years. Can't we provide some sort of area there for people who are in danger to have safety and not have to leave the entire region?
I'll just repeat what I've said. We have analyzed, and I'm prepared to have shared with you the analysis we've done of safe zones, buffer zones, and no-fly zones. We have looked at the advantages and costs of those, and the President has not taken them off the table, but we have not undertaken to create any of those zones at this time. I don't rule that out in the future, Senator, and we're happy to discuss it with you and discuss in a different setting the analysis that we have done.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator Ayotte. I want to thank the chair. Also thank Senator Donnelly. Appreciate it. I wanted to ask Secretary Carter. Recently, the Iranians have actually tested a long-range missile in violation of existing UN Security Council resolutions. This is something that Ambassador Power has confirmed, and in fact, if you look at what the Iranians have done post-agreement, not only have they tested this missile, but of course they've wrongfully convicted a Washington Post reporter in Iran. And of course, we've had a lot of discussion today about the cooperation between Russia and Iran undermining stability in Syria and our interests there. So I've also been brought to my attention recently that the Supreme Leader of Iran has actually said about the recent agreement that any imposition of sanctions at any level under any pretext, including repetitive and fabricated pretexts of terrorism and human rights on the part of any countries involved in the negotiations, will constitute a violation of the JCPOA. So here's my question to both of you, and primarily to you, Secretary Carter. What are we going to do about their violation of already existing UN resolutions when it comes to testing ballistic missiles and long-range missiles? And you know, you're the one that testified before this committee. The I in ICBM is intercontinental. And as I see it, already Iran is violating resolutions with no response from us. Already the Supreme Leader is basically saying you impose sanctions on any reason, even our support for terrorism or other human rights violation, we're going to walk away from the JCPOA. So do you not agree that their violation of the missile resolution warrants a response from the United States of America? And what is that response going to be? Because at this point, I haven't seen any response.
I think that it needs to be very clear, it's certainly clear to us in the Department of Defense, that the conclusion of the nuclear deal with Iran, assuming it gets implemented, which is part of what your question gets to, does not address all of our security concerns.
But let me ask you this, just
Iran.
Yes or no, should we respond to their testing of this missile that violates existing UN resolutions?
I'll describe one response that's in our area, and that is our continuing commitment to the development of missile defenses. That's one of the reasons why we are developing and fielding.
I understand that we're developing missile defenses, but what is our response when they behave badly already? Shouldn't there be a response from the United States of America? We had recently a panel of experts here, and I asked each of them, and they came from different perspectives, if we should respond, and they all agreed, yes.
Well, in our area of responsibility, I would say this, Senator, I'll let the Ambassador Power and Secretary Kerry address the diplomatic side of it, but in our area of responsibility, and I made this clear right from the beginning of the negotiations on the Iranian nuclear deal, that does not end all of our security concerns with respect to Iran.
I mean,
that is why,
Mr. Secretary, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time, but ending, it seems not ending. It seems like it's just beginning, really, as we think about this whole unholy alliance between Russia and Iran undermining our interests in Syria, as we think about them testing in our faces this long-range missile, as we think about what the Supreme Leader has basically said, any sanctions, we're going to walk away from the JCPOA, I would say that it's really just beginning. That said, I have the privilege of recently on Friday going to the Guantanamo Bay detention facility and meeting with our men and women who serve there. And they're doing an excellent job under difficult circumstances, as you know. And one of the issues that was brought to my attention, and I know that you, as a leader in our military, one of your jobs, having been a commander and serving obviously in the highest position in our military, understand that taking care of our men and women in uniform is so critical. And yet we have a situation down there where we met with women guards who are being prevented from fully performing their mission because the 5 9/11 attackers who are charged with killing 3,000 Americans will not allow them to perform their duties because they're women. Can you tell me what you think about that and whether you think that is right and how we should be addressing that?
Senator, I can tell you how I feel about it. I feel the same way as the commander, U.S. Southern Command, General Kelly, who describes it as outrageous. And I read his weekly report and have read it for about probably the last 7 or 8 weeks, to include the 2 or 3 weeks before transition. So it's outrageous. He's identified it, and as you probably know, Senator, that's being worked by lawyers. It's an injunction. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just sharing with you that's actually where it's at right now. It's being worked by lawyers. The commander has identified it. I think it ought to be. It is outrageous. It ought to be fixed. It hasn't been to date.
I'd like to see the administration speak out against this. Here we talk about giving women more opportunity in combat, but this is a area where these women that we met with, by the way, that are serving there, they're the very best, and they are not being able to perform the full responsibilities of their positions simply because they are women, because 9/11 terrorists are manipulating the system to say that our women cannot guard them. Secretary Carter, I hope you would agree with me that this is outrageous, and I would hope that the administration would do everything in its power to stand up for our women in the military.
I do want to associate myself with what the chairman said. It is outrageous. And what General Kelly said, this is the pursuant to an action of a federal judge, and I understand that. But if you're asked, I think it is counter to the way we treat service members, including women service members, and outrageous is a very good word for it.
I appreciate both of you.